Hey, even Paul, when he was Saul, he was killing Christians. He was hunting them down and killing them. Jesus appeared to him, and he became a new man, a new creature. That's another interesting point, that if these men wrote the Bible, just thinking of a humanism point, would you want to put those things that you did in that book for others to read? No, I'd be the most perfect. My autobiography would have been I'd be the most perfect man ever. I wouldn't put anything. I would have never lied or anything like that. Right. Well, Cindy knows. So yeah, that's another interesting point on that. Now, in the previous, so that was the last question, but on the previous questions, it had I don't know if y'all had that, but it had these views of justification. So I'll go ahead and go through them with y'all. On justification, Rome's view was instrumental cause baptism, which means baptism is necessary according to John 3:5 and the Nicene Creed, where it states we believe in one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. So the Catholic Church takes that and says, well, you need this to be saved. Okay? The Reformed view is instrumental cause, which is faith. Again, faith alone. Now, the Roman Catholic Church specifically appealed to James 2:24 to rebuke the Protestant who said that they were justified by faith alone. You see that a person is justified by what he does and not by faith alone. So how could James say it any more clear? It would seem that the text would blow Luther out of the water forever. Some scholars say we have a conflict between Paul and James, that James was written after Paul, and James tried to correct Paul. So that's the reasoning behind why the Catholic Church continues to believe that baptism is needed, because James said that about works. But then others say that Paul wrote Romans after James. So again, that was something where it was conflicted. But if a person says he has faith, but he gives no outward evidence of that faith through righteous works, his faith will not justify him. So we are not saved by a profession of faith or by a claim to faith. The faith has to be genuine before the merit of Christ. Will it be imputed to anybody? You can't just say you have faith. The faith will absolutely and necessarily yield the fruits of obedience and the works of righteousness. Works don't add to the person's justification on the day of judgment. But they do justify his claim to faith before the eyes of man. Okay, so James is saying not that the man is justified before God by his works, but that his claim to faith is shown to be genuine as he demonstrates the evidence of that claim of faith through works. Okay? Yes, Pastor.
It's interesting to note that John's description of the day of judgment in the book of Revelation, it says, I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and they were judged according to the things that were written in the books, according to their works. It doesn't say they were judged according to their faith. So we got two sides of the same coin, really. Two ways of saying, so James says it one way and Paul says it another way, and they're not contradicting each other. And we have the same thing with some of the Puritans, like Richard Baxter and John Owen. Same, like Richard Baxter took more the James side of the coin, and Owen took more of Paul's side. But they were brothers. And we need to understand we have a problem with language and semantics, you know.
Right. Yes, Chuck.
When they talk about judged according to their works, I always struggled with that also, and the only way I could resolve it was read it as though they were judged according to the evidence of their faith, which is their works.
Yeah, that's good. Again, if you say you're a Christian, if you say you have faith in God, then other people will see that by what you do, whether you are or not. It's pretty simple as that. Okay, so in the next part of justification, Rome's view is infused righteousness. The Reformed view is imputed righteousness. So, according to the Catholic Church, infused righteousness states that through the keeping of the commands of Christ, regular confession and penance, and receiving the sacraments, God's grace, righteousness, is infused in believers more and more over time, and their own righteousness in the flesh becomes subsumed into God's righteousness. So again, they continue to do these things, and soon enough it'll be embedded in them through penance, confession, receiving the sacraments, and everything like that. And that's what I'm talking about, the evidence, because when I was a Roman Catholic, every Sunday I'd go to do the communion, and because the priest would say, well, confess your sins, blah, blah, blah. So I do that. All right, I'm fine. Now I have a new week to go and sin. That's pretty much how I justified it in my head. Because, next week, if I don't die, which I didn't think I was going to die anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do whatever I want and then come back and then cleanse myself. But that's the way it is, and I'm not speaking to myself. I've witnessed other people say it, confess it. That's the way, because that's the way it was set up in the church. It's marked the Catholic Church that I went to as far as that. Now, Reformed view is imputed righteousness. That is that the righteousness of Christ is imputed to believers, that is, treated as if it were theirs through faith. It is on this basis that it's alien, something from the outside righteousness that God accepts humans. As we stand before God, we won't point to ourselves and see what we've done. We point to Christ and what he did. It's all about him and what he did. So that's imputed righteousness. That's the Reformed view. The next one is the Rome's view is inherent righteousness. And again, Reformed view is alien righteousness. Now, let's see. So I did go to a Catholic website, and this is what they talked about when it talks about inherent infused righteousness. That God helps us through Christ to become righteous. Not all Christ, but he helps us along, kind of maybe we have 90% Christ and then 10% us type of thing. So he helps us along to get to that righteousness. So their point, their rejection of the alien righteousness that Reformed viewers have is, let's say we have a dirty robe, a sinner does. So instead of taking off that dirty robe, we put Christ's robe on top of our dirty robe, and the Catholics would say, well, no, that's not correct. We need to take off the dirty robe before you put on the new robe. So that's what that infused righteousness and alien righteousness talks about. So those are the different types of views on that. Let's see. Another one was, grace plus merit. That's the Catholic view. And then grace alone, that's the Reformed view. Now, the grace plus merit, the Catholics use the Council of Trent about this, is that none of these things which precede justification, whether faith or works, merit the grace of justification, for it is by grace, it is now not by works. It is not now by works. Otherwise, the apostle says grace is no more grace. So that's not true, because they still practice indulgences, because they believe in purgatory and everything like that. So it's not about that. Now, grace alone, we see that we do not see how it is possible to give any glory to the sinner before or after salvation, and at the same time honor Paul, as he told in Ephesians, Ephesians 2:8 and 9. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no man can boast. So there's a difference right there. Catholics have help along the way to get righteous. We say, nope, it's all God through faith. It's all Jesus, not from ourselves, anything from ourselves. That's filthy rags. Okay? Right. Yeah, I even saw that. I think one person commented, well, isn't even having faith a work? Don't you have to work to have faith? Something like that. It comes from God. It's not something that we drum up ourselves. Now I believe. So it's all God because we are dead in our trespasses and sins. So there's nothing we can do before God awoke us.
I'm reading a great book, and I just ordered a couple more copies for that Chuck loaned me, that Al loaned him, about how the Puritans preached and how modern evangelicals preach. With the modern way is with the invitation system, and you work up a feeling and sell people into making a decision. Whereas the way the Puritans did it, they just expounded the Word of God and applied it to show what God is like. And when that revelation comes to people, they automatically make a decision once they get the revelation. So it comes by revelation. It doesn't come by works. So actually, the new method, I'm talking about Billy Graham and the whole invitation system, is a works mentality. And Charles Finney was the one that brought that change to evangelical churches during the Second Great Awakening in the early 1820s, because he did not believe that man is totally depraved. Therefore, man can do something. Man can obey God out of his own nature because he's not a fallen creature. So the whole evangelical movement swallowed that new teaching. And that's where we are today. I mean, all evangelical denominations just about are into that. And it's really a works system, just like the Catholics and just like the Judaizers. So we've got to be reprogrammed by the Word of God.
Definitely. Remember, I've gone to a few churches where towards the end of the service, the pastor starts breaking it down, kind of slow it down. Let's get a nice mood going on, so the lights go down, the music starts, and it's very So it's the sound is kind of soothing, and you're just like that, and everybody has their head down praying, and then the pastor starts his invitation message. So he has that thing where everybody's supposed to be looking down. So if you are ready to come and receive Jesus, nobody's watching, everybody's looking down. So don't be afraid. Just get up and come on in, come on down. We're praying for you and this and that. So it's a very, it's a method, it's a movement. Mm-hmm. Right.
Those of you who raised your hands, stand up. So they stand up. Okay, now come forward and kneel down here. Or come forward to receive prayer or to receive salvation. It's tricky methods. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It works too.
Tricky.
But it doesn't bring salvation. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Works to what end? So, and going back to, some people believe that we do have some sort of goodness in our hearts. The analytical justification that Rome believes, that Rome teaches that we must have some kind of inherent righteousness in order to be justified, because because it's rooted in us, and that's how some good works can work towards our salvation. So that's when it comes to depravity in man. So that's the difference between the Catholic and the Reformed view. All right, I think I think that sums it up on the chapter 3. So we'll go ahead and move on to chapter 4. The fourth foundation stone. That's been up there the whole time. All right. Chapter 4, devoted to the prophet, priest, and king. Devoted to Jesus Christ. So we'll go ahead and go into question 1. What are 2 items in which Reformed theology agrees with Catholic theology? So there is an agreement between Roman Catholics and Reformers. We have the doctrine of God and the person of Christ. So there's no denying that the Catholic Church, they believe in a triune God and that Jesus Christ being truly God and truly man. So those are essentials when it comes to the faith compared to other religions where they just believe that God is one person, Jesus is, a son, something else. Or God, there's so many gods, or that you can become a god like the Mormons believe. So that's 2 things that the Catholic theology and Reformed theology agree with. So that's a good start. That's a good foundation base to start an argument, to start a debate with on, on scripture or anything like that. So easy to argue. Okay, question 2. Sabellius. What did Sabellius teach? What's that? That Jesus Christ was just in one essence with God. Again, a lower mode of being than God himself. So Dr. Sproul explains, kind of gives an example of Sabellius, of that the sun, S-U-N, and its rays, they share the same essence. It's the same substance, but you can distinguish from them. You have the sun rays, but you have the source, the sun. So they share the same essence, but it's not the sun. If you see a sun ray, you will not say, well, that's the sun. You'll say that's a sun ray. But if you see the sun, that's the sun. So according to Sabellius, he would see Jesus doing his works and stuff. Well, that's Jesus. That's not God. God is up here. So again, it separates God. So that's what Sabellius taught. And which council condemned him and when? Chalcedon? No. We have the Council of Antioch in 267. In that council, it declared that Jesus is of similar or like substance, and it rejected Sabellius because of its Gnostic idea of modalism. Again, just one God, not 3 persons, one God. So we'll get into that because later in the book it talks about how Sabellius had, there was an agreement on something, but we'll get into that. So that council of Antioch had rejected and called Sabellius a heretic because of that. Jesus was not a lower mode or kind of like God. He was God. And then we go to the next question. What did Nestorius teach? Oh, what's that? That Jesus is 2 persons. Right. Yeah. So Nestorius argued that only 2 persons can have 2 natures. So that means that Jesus is really 2 persons. So again, what 2 natures are we talking about? That there's a God, there's a man. You can't be both. That's what Nestorius taught. Again, according to our physics and everything like that. So that's what he taught. And the council that condemned him, which council was it and when? think I sent out the questions too late, and that's what happened. What's that? Yeah, the Council of Chalcedon in 451 declaring that Jesus was truly man and truly God. And that is, what we share with the Roman Catholics, that we do believe, both believe that Jesus is truly man and truly God. All right, now we go to Arius. What did Arius teach? Arianism. That's good. So Arius taught that Jesus was the firstborn of all creations, meaning he had a beginning and was not eternal. So that's what Arius taught, because again, it talks about Jesus being the only begotten Son. Jehovah's Witness, they believe that Jesus had a beginning and
He's not God.
he's not God.
Jehovah's Witnesses say that Jesus is not God. He's just the Son of God.
Right.
That's also what my mother taught me. A lot of modernists believe that.
Yeah, that I do remember. I think the first time when I became a Christian, I was excited to have Jehovah's Witnesses coming to my door, because that's all I have new information. It's kind of like that thing when you go to college and the first year when you take philosophy class and you come back and start arguing with everybody because you know some philosophy now, so you think you know all philosophy. That's pretty much any college student. That was me when I first became a Christian. I wanted to debate everybody, and boy, was I wrong about a lot of things, and taught me a lot. But that was one of the things that I remember talking to the Jehovah's Witness when in the Genesis creation, when God says, let us make man into our own image. So I always ask him, like, well, it says let us. Who is he talking? Is he talking to himself? Who is he talking to somebody else? Who is he talking about? So obviously there's more than one God. Was he talking to Jesus, the Holy Spirit? So that was one thing that I remember. So yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses do believe that Jesus and Arius, Jesus was the firstborn. He had a beginning of all creation. Now with that, which council condemned him and when? Question 9. What's that? The Council of Nicaea in 325, declaring that Jesus was begotten, not made. The Council of Nicaea declared that Jesus is eternal, meaning no beginning and no end. Now remember, again, there's like conflicting reports, but does anybody remember what also happened in the Council of Nicaea pertaining to this season? What's that? Trinity, right? But there was like a fun fact that happened in Nicaea when it comes to Arius. Yeah. Did he? Yeah. So, again, I was reading and trying to figure it out, but something happened where Arius was talking this heresy about Jesus being firstborn, and apparently someone named Saint Nicholas didn't like what he was saying, and there's some reports that he slapped back to Arius. So either it was literally he slapped Arius or slapped back, meaning he kind of rebuked him. So, yeah, Saint Nicholas, the person that Santa Claus is, originally inspired from, apparently slapped Arius at the Council of Nicaea because of this heresy. So, Google it, do your Googles, just to figure it out. But that's what I had. You always can check everything I say, just as Pastor does in the sermon, everything like that. Check whatever you're saying. Just don't believe what I'm saying. Check for yourselves. If I'm wrong, then so be it. I'll gladly stand corrected. So, now with this council, let's see. Okay, well, Jesus is the only begotten Son. Now, question 8. What did the Monophysite heresy teach? Shout out to all the teachers. So I remember in class. Well, I'm saying when I remember in class where the teacher would kind of ask stuff and they just stare and kind of you have to keep on going. So yeah. That's part of it, Chuck. Right. It was argued that Christ is one person with one nature, attacking the idea of Christ having a divine and human nature. So, Christ can only be one nature because he's only one person. So that was what that heresy was. And which council condemned it and when? Again, we go back to the Council of Chalcedon in 451 that declared Christ was truly man and truly God. 100% man, 100% God. Yes, Pastor.
And that was in 451, right?
451.
451 AD. What happened then? That's the first time the church is divided. The Coptic Church of Egypt, they were monophysites. Jesus just had one nature, not two natures. So they separated from the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is not the Roman Catholic Church at that time. There was no Roman Catholic Church at that time. It was the Latin Church and the Greek Church. Right? East and West were still together. And they both agreed in the Council of Chalcedon. The other church that separated was the Church of Syria, the Syriac Church. Separated because they also believed that Jesus just had one nature, and they were wrong. He has two natures. How many natures does Christ have? All right, that's orthodoxy. The other church that separated was Egypt, but they did it more for political reasons because they identified with Egypt, the Ethiopian church. The other church that separated at that time was the Church of Armenia. And they separated more for political reasons also because they were being attacked by the Persians who were Zoroastrians and persecuted, and Rome would not help. The Roman Empire would not.
Zoroastrians? What's
Yeah.
that? Can you explain that?
Zoroastrians is a very ancient religion from Persia that believed in one God, but that God and Satan are in a war. They were dualistic. And that God will eventually win. How many Christians believe that heresy?
Yeah, there's a lot of belief in that they have the same power, but on opposite ends. Yeah.
That's Zoroastrianism. They did believe in one God.
Right.
Some people accused them of worshiping fire, but they didn't worship fire. So the Church of Armenia separated at that time. And the Church of Armenia was the country, the nation of Armenia, was the first Christian nation state in history. But they separated at that time, at the time of the Chalcedon Council in 451. So they were not called Catholics. The Nestorians went on to evangelize in Persia and China, but they believed Jesus is two persons. Jesus is not two persons. He has two natures. He's God and man, and two wills.
Two wills.
Two wills, but he's one person.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that, about the two natures of Christ, I think in some questions following this. So, yeah, the Council of Chalcedon in 451 condemned that Christ is one person with one nature, when in fact Christ is truly man and truly God. The next question, what are the two natures of Christ? Man and God, divine and human nature. So yeah, that was easy. All right. Now we get into the nitty-gritty. What is transubstantiation and who teaches it? Oh. Yes.
Sorry,
Pablo.
Brian. Sorry to interrupt. I have a question. When we say the two natures of Christ, human and divine. Still right now, or we were talking Pastor Ron when he was on earth? Now. Still man?
So with the new body, a heavenly body, glorified body, right? Yeah. Anne had a question. Right. Yeah, that's the question. Mm-hmm.
That is the idea that the Roman Catholic Church teaches, that the bread and wine become the literal body of and blood of Christ
Right.
once it's blessed by the priest.
Right.
Is that the
That
way?
is, yes, that is transubstantiation. The Roman Catholic Church, again, they believe that's always been like that. They've always quote, early church fathers about that, but that they teach that the bread and wine supernaturally transform into the body and blood of Christ. And yes, Pastor.
After the Reformation, or during the Reformation at the time of John Knox, and the country of Scotland was converted to the Reformed view. It was against the law in Scotland to celebrate the Mass because John Knox said it is idolatry. They're worshiping the flesh of Jesus. This bread, they think it's the flesh of Jesus, literally,
Right.
and the wine. So that's idolatry. So that's why John Knox made it against the law in Scotland. Now, Mary, Queen of Scots, was a Catholic, but she had to have Mass privately in a private room in the palace.
Yeah. So the bread and wine, if you go to a Catholic church today, they have an altar up there and with the glass and gold. Okay. So we'll stop here so we can set up for the service. So we'll continue on next week. So this is a nice, nice preview of next week. Should be good. All right. Well, thank you all very much. God bless.